The crunch of gravel beneath my tires felt different today. Something was off. My black Jeep rounded the final curve of Cedar Hollow Road, revealing my family's ranch. Except it wasn't ours anymore. A massive concrete structure rose from what had once been endless fields of corn, its windows gleaming like 1,000 watchful eyes. I pulled over, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The ranch I'd known my entire life had vanished. Where crops once swayed, a 3-story hotel now stood, complete with manicured lawns, decorative shrubs, and a sprawling parking lot. Bright orange construction barriers surrounded the property, and workers in hard hats scurried around like ants. My mind raced. How could this happen? I'd only been gone for a month, a critical consultant job in Tokyo that my family desperately needed. Emma and I had discussed every detail before I left. We'd secured everything, or so we thought. The ranch had been in my family for 4 generations, each acre sacred and carefully maintained. A construction worker noticed me and walked over, clipboard tucked under his arm. "Can I help you?" he asked. I stepped out of the Jeep, my legs unsteady. "This is my family's land," I said, my voice calm but firm. The worker shifted uneasily. "Oh, you're the owner." He seemed unsure how to proceed. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed, a text from Emma. "Michael, emergency. Call me ASAP." But my eyes stayed fixed on the hotel, rising from my family's soil like some alien monument. I walked closer, my boots crunching over ground that once grew food for generations. Each step felt like a betrayal. This wasn't just a building, it was a declaration that someone believed they could simply take what didn't belong to them. Near the entrance, a large sign caught my attention. Oak Ridge Community Development. Approved by HOA Board. Project Director, Linda Morrison. My jaw tightened. Linda, the HOA president. She'd always considered our ranch an eyesore, complaining about fence lines, irrigation runoff, even the height of our grass. She wanted this land for years. But this was beyond anything I imagined. A stack of papers sat on a nearby table. Curiosity drew me in. Construction permits, zoning approvals, city stamps. Each document told a piece of the story I was desperate to uncover. One line stood out, a vague note about a community improvement zone. It wasn't illegal, but the wording felt calculated, slippery. The worker cleared his throat. "Sir, you can't be here." His voice lacked conviction. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Don't worry, I'll be leaving soon." Driving back into town, my thoughts spun. How long had this been planned? What loopholes had Linda exploited? And most importantly, how could I prove it was wrong? Emma's text still burned unanswered on my phone. But I needed information first. This wasn't just about land. This was about justice, about protecting a legacy. A billboard loomed as I passed. Oak Ridge, building together. The irony stung. Building together apparently meant taking without asking. At a small diner in town, I opened my notebook and began scribbling dates, observations, questions. Each note was another step toward unraveling the puzzle. The ranch wasn't just property, it was history. It was future. The waitress refilled my coffee. "Rough day?" she asked. I looked up, a determined smile forming. "Just getting started," I replied. Linda Morrison had no idea I was about to fight back, and I would fight smart. Later that evening, sunlight streamed through the cracks of my old barn, illuminating floating specks of dust as I pulled out a battered metal file cabinet. Inside were stacks of yellow documents my grandfather had meticulously preserved. I spread them across the workbench. Old property maps, handwritten deeds, notes in faded ink. Most families would have tossed them decades ago, but my grandfather was a cautious man, always planning for the unexpected. His preparations might now be my only chance. The first document I studied was a hand-drawn map from 1955, pencil lines marking the exact borders of our ranch. I remembered his voice. "Knowledge is your best weapon." As I examined the pile, a pattern emerged. The HOA hadn't just appeared overnight. They'd been eroding property rights for years, inch by inch. Meeting minutes, legal notices, letters, all of them told the story of Linda Morrison's long campaign against us. A faded yellow envelope caught my eye. Inside was a series of letters detailing a property dispute from decades ago. The HOA had tried this tactic before, claiming abandoned or underused land for community development, but someone had stopped them. These documents showed exactly how. I pulled out my phone and began photographing each page, my hand steady though my mind raced. Every sheet was a potential piece of the puzzle. Emma would help me later. She had a gift for spotting connections I often missed. The barn suddenly felt different. These weren't just old papers anymore. They were evidence, weapons in a fight I hadn't asked for but was now determined to win. A noise outside made me freeze. Gravel crunched under tires. Through the dusty window, I saw a white SUV pull up to the property line, HOA parking sticker gleaming on the windshield. Out stepped Linda Morrison, her designer sunglasses reflecting the midday sun. She walked with the kind of confidence that comes from believing everything in sight belongs to you. I stayed in the shadows, watching silently. Linda pulled out a clipboard, making notes as though she were taking inventory of my land. Her expensive heels sank slightly into the soil where my corn had grown just weeks ago. Behind her, the half-finished hotel loomed like a concrete scar on the landscape. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, my attorney. "Found something interesting. Call me ASAP." I forced myself to stay still. One wrong move and Linda would twist it into evidence that I was an unreasonable landowner. My grandfather had always said patience was a strategy, not a weakness. In the past few days, my research had revealed more than property lines. It uncovered a web of ties between the HOA, local developers, and even city council members. Every connection was another thread in a carefully woven net of politics and land grabs. Linda finished her inspection and drove off, leaving nothing but dust and tension in her wake. I waited a few minutes, then stepped out of the barn. The land felt different now. Not a farm, but a battlefield. My next move had to be precise. The documents I clutched were only the beginning. Somewhere among them was the key to stopping Linda and the HOA's takeover. I looked at the hotel in the distance. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. The community center buzzed like a war room when I walked through its double doors. Stacks of carefully organized documents filled my leather briefcase, each one a weapon in the fight for my family's land. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting long shadows over the crowd of HOA board members and curious residents. At the head of the long wooden table sat Linda Morrison. Her tailored blazer and immaculate hair screamed control. Linda had always been the type who bent rules rather than followed them. I remembered her cornering neighbors in past meetings, her sugar-coated voice barely masking the steel beneath. "I'd like to address the recent development on my family's ranch," I began, my voice calm and steady. The room fell silent. Whispers died. A tense stillness filled the air. I spread out the first set of documents. Old property maps dating back to my grandfather's time, each one notarized and meticulously preserved. They showed clear boundary lines, easements, and historical agreements that predated the HOA's very existence. My fingers traced the faded pencil lines. Each stroke was both history and defense. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Linda's eyebrow twitch. Barely noticeable, but enough. She knew she was standing on shaky ground. I continued. These documents prove that the land where the hotel now stands was never legally transferable without my explicit consent. I pulled out photographs. Decades of images showing continuous use of the ranch, crop rotations and family presence. Each one time-stamped, each one another nail in the HOA's coffin. From the back row, a familiar face leaned forward. Martha Thompson, a longtime resident known for her fairness. I watched her expression shift from curiosity to concern as she examined the maps. Linda tried to cut in. "Mr. Carter, this is hardly—" "I'm not finished," I said firmly, my tone steady but sharp. Years of consulting had taught me the value of measured words. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. I pulled out one more surprise. A private environmental impact study. The report exposed flaws in the hotel's construction, drainage issues threatening local water supplies, soil disruptions violating county guidelines. Each claim was backed by certified geological data. The room was no longer just tense, it was electric. Martha raised her hand. "Could you explain the environmental concerns?" I walked her through the technical details, breaking complex concepts into simple language. My goal wasn't to overwhelm, but to inform. The room listened, truly listened. Linda's face was a storm of emotions: anger, fear, desperation. She realized I wasn't just challenging the hotel's construction, I was exposing a pattern of systematic overreach. "You can't just take land," I said quietly. "This isn't just about a hotel. This is about respecting property rights, family legacy, and community trust." A young board member, Justin, leaned forward. I remembered his name from previous meetings. "We have some questions about the documentation," he said. I smiled. Questions meant engagement. Questions meant they understood the gravity of what I was presenting. For the next hour, I methodically dismantled the HOA's case. Each document, each photograph, each legal reference built a stronger argument. I wasn't just defending my ranch, I was defending a principle. As the meeting progressed, I noticed a shift. Board members who had looked dismissive now appeared concerned. Martha was taking notes. Justin was studying the environmental reports with genuine interest. Linda, however, remained silent, her earlier confidence eroding with every passing minute. When I finished, the room was alive with possibility. I hadn't won yet, but I had planted seeds of doubt, seeds that would grow into serious questions about the HOA's actions. As people filed out, Martha approached. "Those environmental reports are serious," she whispered. "I don't think the board fully understood what was happening." I nodded, collecting my documents. The real battle was only beginning. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. My truck waited quietly, a reminder of the ranch still standing behind me. But something had changed. This fight wasn't just about land anymore. It was about justice. Across the lot, Linda watched me, her eyes burning with hatred and fear. She knew I wouldn't back down. Not now, not ever. The next morning, old Mr. Henderson from the neighboring farm knocked on our door. His weathered hands trembled as he slid a worn manila envelope across the kitchen counter. "You'll want to see this," he whispered, his voice heavy with secrets. Inside was a collection of faded photographs and handwritten notes, evidence I never expected. Linda Morrison hadn't just targeted my ranch. She had a long history of land grabs stretching back decades. The documents revealed a pattern: manipulative tactics, backdoor deals, and a systematic approach to seizing community land under the guise of neighborhood improvement. Emma placed a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. I spread the papers out. These aren't just old records. They're a roadmap to Linda's entire strategy. Mr. Henderson sank into a chair, his eyes distant. "She's been at this for years," he said quietly. "No one ever had the courage to stand up to her before." One photograph caught my attention, an aerial view of Oak Ridge from the late 1990s. Red lines marked property boundaries, but they didn't match the county records I'd been studying. "I remember when she first became HOA president," Mr. Henderson continued. "She promised to make the community better, but better for whom?" Emma began making copies of the documents, her movements precise and careful. Each page was potential evidence, each photograph another weapon in our legal arsenal. Through the window, I noticed a young woman passing by. She looked familiar. I'd seen her at HOA meetings. She hesitated, glanced nervously at our house, then walked quickly away. "Who was that?" I asked. Emma shook her head. She had already noticed the woman's behavior. Mr. Henderson leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Some folks in town don't support Linda's plans, but they're afraid. She has ways of making life hard for anyone who speaks out." I spread the documents across the table, mapping out connections. Rezoning changes, quiet boundary adjustments, suspicious permit approvals. Linda had been playing the long game, and my ranch was just her latest prize.
We need to be careful, I told Emma. These papers are powerful, but one mistake and she'll twist everything against us. The phone rang, an unknown number. Emma answered, her voice calm. The call was brief, cryptic. When she hung up, her expression had changed. "Someone wants to meet you," she said. "Someone who knows more about Linda's past projects." Mr. Henderson's eyes twinkled. "The truth has a way of finding its way out," he muttered. I organized the documents, sliding each into a protective sleeve. Years of my grandfather's careful record-keeping were about to pay off. Linda thought she could simply take what she wanted, but she had no idea what was coming. Outside, a dark car rolled slowly past our house, its presence lingering like a warning.
I caught a glimpse of a familiar face, the same young woman I'd seen before. She was watching, waiting. But for what? Emma squeezed my hand. "We're in this together," she said. The documents spread out before me were more than just paper. They were proof of a systematic land grab, proof that Linda Morrison believed she was untouchable, and most importantly, proof that we were going to fight back. Mr. Henderson stood to leave, but paused long enough to share one last piece of wisdom. "Sometimes," he said, "the quietest people have the loudest stories." As he walked out, a single document slipped from his jacket, fluttering to the floor, another piece of the puzzle waiting to be discovered. The next morning, I organized the pile of papers into neat stacks: maps, tax records, deeds, surveys. A maze of information that would soon become my weapon. Across from me sat Marcus Thompson, the lawyer I'd hired. His reading glasses rested carefully on his nose as he leaned over an old surveyor's map. "These property lines are more complicated than I first thought," Marcus muttered, his voice carrying both focus and excitement. Hope stirred in my chest. I remembered how Linda had always looked down on my family at HOA meetings. Her cutting remarks about outdated farming methods and inefficient land use. Her pressed suits, polished nails, and condescending smirk had always stood in sharp contrast to my calloused hands and scuffed work boots. But today, those hands weren't symbols of labor. They were tools of justice. Emma set down fresh mugs of coffee, her hand brushing my shoulder. She knew how much this meant. This wasn't just land, it was heritage, legacy. Marcus pulled out a series of county records, spreading 3 maps across the table. "Look at this," he said. I leaned closer. The maps, each from a different decade, told conflicting stories. When aligned, tiny discrepancies emerged, small shifts in property lines so subtle most people would overlook them. "The HOA didn't do their homework," Marcus whispered, a smile creeping across his face. "They assumed everything was simple. Nothing in land law ever is." We spent hours combing through documents, tax receipts, inheritance papers, old letters between my grandfather and county officials. Each item was another piece of the puzzle. Marcus's phone buzzed with a notification. He checked it, then looked up with a spark in his eyes. "The local historical society just got back to me. They've got records dating back to the 1940s. Land use documents this HOA has probably never even seen." I thought about Linda, how she strutted around Oak Ridge like a queen inspecting her kingdom.
her pristine lawn, her glossy newsletters, her air of superiority. But today, those hands weren't symbols of labor. They were tools of justice. Emma set down fresh mugs of coffee, her hand brushing my shoulder. She knew how much this meant. This wasn't just land. It was heritage, legacy. Marcus pulled out a series of county records, spreading 3 maps across the table. "Look at this," he said. I leaned closer. The maps, each from a different decade, told conflicting stories. When aligned, tiny discrepancies emerged, small shifts in property lines, so subtle most people would overlook them. "The HOA didn't do their homework," Marcus whispered, a smile creeping across his face. "They assumed everything was simple. Nothing in land law ever is." We spent hours combing through documents, tax receipts, inheritance papers, old letters between my grandfather and county officials. Each item was another piece of the puzzle. Marcus's phone buzzed with a notification. He checked it, then looked up with a spark in his eyes. The local historical society just got back to me. They've got records dating back to the 1940s. Land use documents this HOA has probably never even seen. I thought about Linda, how she strutted around Oak Ridge like a queen inspecting her kingdom. Her pristine lawn, her glossy newsletters, her air of superiority. But kingdoms fall, and hers would crumble under the weight of its own arrogance. Marcus was careful. "We can't show our full hand yet. If we reveal too much, they'll bury whatever's left." I nodded. He was right. This was a chess game, and every move mattered. Emma returned with a dusty box she'd found in the attic. "These were your grandmother's," she said. Inside were old property surveys, land transfers, even handwritten notes in faded ink. Marcus's eyes widened as he sifted through them. "These could change everything," he murmured. The afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen window, throwing long shadows across the stacks of paper. Each page was more than history. It was ammunition. Out on the horizon, the half-built hotel towered over the fields like a monument to Linda's greed. But monuments can fall, and this one would. The phone rang. Marcus checked the caller ID and smiled. "County Records Office. They found something." I stared out at the land Linda had tried to steal. For generations, my family had worked these fields. And now, those same fields held the secret to saving them. Marcus packed up the files, securing them in his briefcase. "We're not just fighting for land," he said. "We're fighting for justice." As he left, evening settled over the ranch. The hotel loomed in the distance, its unfinished walls catching the fading light. I felt a surge of something I hadn't known in weeks: hope. The phone rang again, unknown number. And deep down, I knew this call would change everything. In the attic above, sunlight filtered through the small round window, turning the dust into a swirl of tiny storytellers. Emma's careful hands lifted an old wooden box. This time I had no doubt. Inside was another piece of the truth.
I had never seen the box before, its edges worn, brass hinges slightly tarnished. "I found this behind your grandfather's filing cabinet," Emma said, her voice carrying both excitement and caution. "There's something different about it." I watched as she carefully lifted the lid. Inside, layers of preserved documents formed a mosaic of family history. Old deeds, faded photographs, and decades of correspondence. It was more than a collection. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved. My grandfather had always been more than a farmer. The first document we unfolded was a detailed property map. But this wasn't just any map. Intricate annotations in his precise handwriting covered the margins, connecting our ranch to neighboring plots in ways that suggested a complex legal network. "Look at this," I whispered, tracing a red line that zigzagged across the edge. Tiny symbols, almost like a secret code, marked certain points. "These look like surveyor's marks," Emma said, leaning closer. "But they're different, more intentional." As we dug deeper, a pattern emerged. My grandfather had documented every single interaction with local authorities, surveys, transactions, boundary adjustments. It was as if he had been preparing for a fight that hadn't yet come. One letter caught my eye, a yellow note dated 1973, addressed to the county land registry. It bore my grandfather's signature, but referenced something I never expected: a land trust. A legal mechanism so complex, most modern lawyers would struggle to untangle it. "This isn't just a deed," I muttered. "It's a shield." Emma pulled out another paper, a hand-drawn family tree stretching back far beyond our immediate relatives. Names I didn't recognize were linked with dates and properties, forming an intricate web of ownership. At the bottom of the box sat a sealed envelope, stamped with a wax seal bearing our family's initial. My hands trembled as I broke it open. Inside, in my grandfather's unmistakable script, was a letter. Each word was deliberate. He described protections he had put in place, a generations-old trust that would activate under certain conditions. Conditions that sounded eerily similar to our current battle with the HOA. "He knew," I said softly. "He somehow knew this could happen." But the letter hinted at more than protection. It spoke of a larger story: land rights, development disputes, conflicts that predated the HOA itself. A stack of photographs slid from between the pages, decades of aerial shots showing subtle changes in boundary lines, shifts too small for the untrained eye. My grandfather had been documenting something, leaving behind a trail of evidence. One image in particular caught my attention: Linda Morrison's family property, taken decades ago. The boundaries looked wrong. Not illegal, perhaps, but suspicious. "We need Marcus to see this," I said, carefully gathering the papers. "But we can't let Linda know, not yet." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Some secrets are better left buried. The game had just changed. The box felt alive with stories of resistance, of carefully laid legal maneuvers waiting decades to be unleashed. My grandfather hadn't just been a farmer, he was a strategist. Emma squeezed my hand. "What's our next move?" I stared at the documents, resolve settling over me. "We prepare." The next morning, Emma watched me, her expression a mix of worry and determination. Our local newspaper, the Oak Ridge Herald, had been hinting at a big story. I knew today was the day it would break. Weeks of work had led to this moment. I'd gathered maps, records, letters, every piece of evidence like a detective solving a case. Each document told the same story. The HOA, led by Linda Morrison, had been systematically trying to steal our land. The phone rang. Jack Miller from the Oak Ridge Herald was on the line, his voice buzzing with urgency.
"We're ready to run it," he said, "but we need to be careful. Linda's not gonna take this lying down." I understood. Small towns are complicated. Everyone knows everyone, and Linda had spent years bullying her way through meetings, pushing around business owners, and bending rules until they broke. But this time, she wouldn't win. Emma set a fresh pot of coffee on the counter. The steam curled upward like a signal of what was coming.
Her hands were steady, but her eyes studied me closely. "Are you sure about this?" Emma asked. It wasn't doubt, it was support. She understood how much this land meant to us. The first call came minutes after the newspaper hit the stands. Linda Morrison's voice cut through the phone like a blade. "You think you can humiliate me?" she hissed. "I've run this community for decades." I stayed calm. "I'm not trying to humiliate anyone," I replied. "I'm protecting what's rightfully ours." Soon, local coffee shops became battlegrounds of conversation. People who had once been silent began to share their own stories. At the gas station, Mr. Rodriguez, who ran a small convenience store, leaned toward me. "She tried the same thing with my property 10 years ago," he whispered. "I didn't have the courage to fight back." By afternoon, the story had spread further. A young reporter, Emily Rodriguez, stood outside our ranch with a microphone. "A local family is challenging the Oak Ridge HOA," she reported, alleging illegal land seizure and abuse of power. Linda's reaction was predictable. She called an emergency HOA meeting and invited the press. I knew the strategy. She wanted to control the narrative, to paint me as a troublemaker. But this time, I was ready. Marcus Thompson, our lawyer, arrived with a thick folder. "They'll try to discredit you," he warned. "Be ready for anything." The community center overflowed with people. Those who once nodded politely at Linda now looked at her with suspicion. The balance of power was shifting, and she knew it. "This is nothing more than a frivolous attack," Linda declared, her voice echoing through the room. "This family is trying to derail our community's progress." But I had receipts, property surveys from 1946, tax records, maintenance logs. Every document was a shield against her accusations. Emma squeezed my hand. Our teenage daughter live-streamed parts of the meeting, and the community watched the truth unfold in real time. During a break, a local real estate agent approached me quietly. "I've worked with the HOA for years," he admitted. "I always thought something seemed off, but I never had proof until now." By evening, the story had spread beyond Oak Ridge. Regional outlets were calling. Property rights groups began to take notice. What started as a neighborhood dispute was quickly becoming something much larger. Linda tried one last intimidation tactic, a legal notice threatening a countersuit. But it was weak, filled with empty threats. We both knew it. As the sun set, casting a golden glow across the ranch, I realized this fight was bigger than us. It was about standing up to bullies, about protecting family legacy, about proving that one voice, armed with truth, could make a difference. The phone rang again. This time it was an investigative reporter from a statewide network. "We want to do a full feature," she said. "Will you share your story?" I glanced at Emma, who nodded with quiet resolve. "Yes," I answered, "we're ready." Little did we know, it was only the beginning. The next day, my fingers traced the faded lines of a property map spread across Marcus's conference table.
The yellowed paper seemed to hum with hidden power. Each crease, each tiny notation whispered secrets about land rights older than most of the county's buildings. "Here," Marcus said, his voice low, his finger pointing to a small symbol I'd overlooked a dozen times. At first, it seemed like nothing, just a tiny dot. But it wasn't just a mark. It was a lifeline. Wetlands. The hotel Linda and the HOA had forced onto our land sat directly over a protected ecological zone. No permit could erase that. Environmental law was unforgiving. I remembered walking this land with my grandfather, listening as he pointed out subtle shifts in soil and the delicate balance of the ecosystem. "Land tells stories," he'd say. "You just have to listen." Now, those stories were about to speak louder than ever, in a courtroom. Marcus spread out satellite images, geological surveys, and water table reports. Each page was a weapon. The HOA thought they could steamroll a family farm, but they'd made a fatal mistake. "They didn't do their homework," Marcus murmured. His eyes met mine, carrying not just legal focus, but personal conviction. He wasn't only my lawyer, he was fighting for something bigger. Emma called mid-meeting. Her voice carried both urgency and excitement. "The local environmental group wants to meet," she said. "They've been tracking possible violations in the area." Another ally, another crack in Linda's armor. I thought of all her past tactics: bullying, manipulation, shady paperwork. She treated community rules like suggestions, believing her title gave her unlimited power. But power built on intimidation never lasts.
But power has limits, and those limits were about to collapse. Environmental regulations were clear. Wetlands weren't just lines on a map. They were living ecosystems protected by state and federal law. Those laws didn't care about HOA presidents or ambitious hotel projects. Marcus outlined the potential violations. Each word hammered another nail into the HOA's coffin. Fines in the hundreds of thousands, mandatory restoration costs, even possible criminal charges for knowingly breaking environmental laws. I showed him the photos I'd taken over the years, shifts in water patterns, changes in plant growth, subtle signs of a fragile balance. That documentation would make our case bulletproof. "They didn't just build a hotel," I said quietly. "They destroyed an ecosystem." A courier arrived mid-meeting, delivering documents from the County Geological Survey. Each page was another layer of armor in our defense. Marcus called an environmental law specialist. Every confirmation strengthened our case. The hotel wasn't just an illegal structure. It was an environmental violation waiting to be exposed. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Check your email. You'll want to see this." The email contained aerial photos showing the exact wetlands boundaries. Someone inside the system wanted to help. Anonymous tips weren't just movie tropes, they were lifelines. Emma joined us with coffee and a stack of community petition signatures. Neighbors who had been silent were finding their voices. The HOA's grip was breaking, one signature at a time. "They thought no one was watching," Marcus said, spreading the documents across the table. "But everyone was watching. They just needed someone to connect the dots." I thought of my grandfather, how he taught me that land ownership wasn't about conquering, but about listening.
Linda Morrison saw property as opportunity. We saw it as responsibility. The case was coming together, not with explosions, but with quiet, steady precision. Each map, photo, and report pulled another brick from the HOA's fortress of arrogance. We weren't just fighting a lawsuit. We were telling a story. A story about community, about respect, about the truth that some things matter more than concrete and profit. The turning point wasn't approaching. It had arrived. The morning of the trial, my hands trembled as I entered the courthouse. Months of preparation had led here, a David versus Goliath battle that would decide the fate of my family's ranch. The benches groaned under the weight of farmers, residents, and curious onlookers. Linda sat 2 rows ahead, her perfectly pressed blazer a shield against the mounting evidence. She adjusted her designer glasses, a nervous tic she couldn't quite hide. Marcus leaned toward me. "Stay calm. We've got this." His confidence was the lifeline I needed. Generations of work, sweat, and legacy hung in the balance. Judge Elizabeth Hartman entered, her stern gaze sweeping the room. She was known for her no-nonsense approach. She'd handled countless land disputes, but something about ours felt different. I saw it in the way her eyes lingered on the stack of documents Marcus had prepared. The court will now hear closing arguments in the matter of Carter versus Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, the bailiff announced. Marcus rose, his navy suit crisp. "Your Honor," he began, "this is more than a property dispute. It is a systematic abuse of power, a deliberate attempt to erase a family's legacy through manipulation and intimidation." He laid out the evidence, property maps dating back to my grandfather's era, notarized preservation documents, original covenant clauses the HOA had ignored. Each record revealed a larger picture of corruption. Linda's attorney tried to interrupt, but Judge Hartman cut him off with a sharp look. Linda's fingers drummed nervously against her leather portfolio, the first crack in her carefully polished armor. "Miss Morrison," the judge said, addressing her directly, "can you explain why your organization proceeded with hotel construction without a full environmental impact study?" Linda's answer was quick, rehearsed. "We followed all standard procedures. The property was technically, Marcus cut in smoothly. "Your Honor, we have evidence that directly contradicts that claim." He presented a series of emails between Linda and local officials. They told a different story, a story of backdoor deals and deliberate circumvention of protocol. I remembered the nights Emma and I had spent sorting through those records, cross-checking dates, piecing together fragments, refusing to give up. Our lives had become...
The legal battle reached its breaking point when a local environmentalist took the stand. Her testimony was damning. Rare plant species destroyed, fragile wetlands disrupted, water table contamination likely. Each fact was another nail in the HOA's coffin. Linda Morrison's composure began to crack. I saw the sweat forming along her temple, her perfectly maintained image unraveling under the weight of truth. Community members who once bowed to her now watched with a mix of relief and respect. Respect for persistence, for the courage to push back. Then came the most powerful moment of the trial. An HOA board member, visibly uneasy, rose from his seat. His voice trembled as he admitted what everyone suspected. Linda had acted without full board approval. "I can't stay silent anymore," he said, each word trembling. What she did wasn't right. The room shifted. Marcus's strategy was clear now. It wasn't just about winning this case. It was about exposing a pattern of abuse, a culture of overreach that had infected Oak Ridge Estates for years. Hour after hour, witnesses testified. Documents were passed from hand to hand. The courtroom became a stage for truth, peeling away the careful lies Linda had woven. I watched her, once untouchable, now shrinking under the glare of facts. Judge Hartman remained steady, her poker face unreadable as she reviewed every map, every deed, every report. She listened without bias, but I could sense the weight of her judgment building like a storm on the horizon. Finally, only one document remained. Marcus rose, each step deliberate. "Your Honor," he said, his voice firm, "this final piece of evidence will reveal the full extent of the HOA's misconduct." Linda's attorney objected, but the air in the room told everyone this was it, the moment of truth. Weeks later, I walked across the ranch. My boots sank softly into soil that felt alive again. Where the hotel's concrete had scarred the fields, green shoots were pushing through, reclaiming what was stolen. The air felt lighter, as though the land itself was breathing again. Emma walked beside me, her eyes scanning the horizon. Only faint foundation scars remained, silent reminders of what we had fought. Marcus had done more than win a case. He had unraveled a web of corruption. Officials, developers, council members, all who thought they could erase family land with a signature. 3 councilmen had already resigned. Investigations spread like wildfire. "They never expected a rancher to fight back," I muttered, letting the soil fall through my fingers. It didn't feel like dirt anymore. It felt like history. It felt like resilience. The community had changed too. Neighbors who once whispered their fears now spoke openly. Small business owners, farmers, families, they stood taller. Local news ran feature after feature about Oak Ridge. What started as one case had become a movement. But Linda wasn't finished. Her glare on the final day in court said enough. She appealed, hinting at powerful allies who might try to reopen the fight. We were ready. Every counterattack had its countermeasure. This wasn't just land anymore. This was a message that ordinary people could stand against powerful organizations, that careful records and community solidarity could overcome corruption. As the sun sank behind the fields, Emma squeezed my hand. "We did it," she whispered. I looked out at the circle and hawk above our land, a silent guardian of what we had reclaimed. And though I knew battles still lay ahead, I also knew this: our family's legacy had endured, and it always would.